If your surname is on this list, you are not just a descendant of the American frontier. You are connected to a specific wagon, a specific company, a specific winter, and in most cases, a specific decision that either saved your family or very nearly killed every one of them. 12 surnames, 12 bloodlines, and by the end of this video, you will know exactly where yours stands in the largest organized religious migration in American history. Stay until number 1, because that name belongs to a family that walked into a Wyoming blizzard with everything they owned in a wooden cart, and what happened to them, the church still cannot discuss without silence falling in the room. Number 12. Woodruff. From the Old English, the name of a small white flowering herb that grows in the shade of forests, woodrove, the plant of the woods. A gentle name, a name that smells like a hedgerow. Wilford Woodruff was one of the men in the first wagon train that entered the Salt Lake Valley in July 1847, and it was his carriage that carried a sick Brigham Young through the mouth of Emigration Canyon on the 24th of July. Woodruff kept a journal for more than 60 years, one of the most complete records of the entire era, thousands of pages, weather, deaths, prices, sermons, everything. He became the 4th president of the church. Without him, half of what we know about the trail would be gone. If your name is Woodruff, your bloodline drove the carriage that carried the leader of an exodus into the valley, and then wrote down everything so that the rest of us could know it happened. The next surname sounds like a farm implement. The man who carried it counted the wheel revolutions of a wagon across 1,000 miles of prairie, and invented the odometer that made the trail navigable for everyone who followed. Number 11. Clayton. From the Old English cleig and tune, the settlement on the clay soil. William Clayton was an English convert, a clerk, a man who thought in numbers. On the 1847 trek, he was tasked with measuring the distance traveled, and at first, he did it by tying a rag to a wagon wheel and counting every single rotation for miles at a stretch. Then he and Orson Pratt and Appleton Harmon built a wooden gearing device that attached to the wheel hub and counted for them. A roadometer. With it, Clayton produced the Latter-day Saints Emigrant's Guide, a mile-by-mile description of the trail, where the water was, where the grass was, where the crossings were. Thousands of people who came after used it like scripture. If your name is Clayton, your bloodline turned a wilderness into a measured road, and everyone who came behind walked on your ancestors' arithmetic. Number 10 sounds like a color. The family who carried it were among the very first, and one of them was not free. Number 10. Flake. From the Old Norse and Northern English, tied to a place, a name carried across the Atlantic centuries before the West existed. And here the story turns. Green Flake was an enslaved black man who traveled in the 1847 Vanguard Company, one of 3 black men in that first group, along with Hark Lay and Oscar Crosby. He drove a wagon into the Salt Lake Valley days before Brigham Young himself arrived. He was there at the founding. He was there when the first furrows were plowed and the first dam was thrown across City Creek. He was not free when he did it. The West was not built only by the people the monuments remember. If your name is Flake, your bloodline was in the very first company into the valley, and the fullest telling of that story is one this country took more than a century to be willing to hear. Number 9 is one of the most common surnames in the English-speaking world. The man who carried it was so feared on the frontier that his name alone was used as a threat. Number 9. Rockwell. From the Old English, the well by the rock, a place where water came out of stone. Orrin Porter Rockwell was a bodyguard, a scout, a hunter for the Vanguard Company, and one of the most controversial figures of the entire western frontier. He was famous for his hair, which he refused to cut for years because of a promise made to Joseph Smith, and infamous for the violence attached to his name. He was a lawman, and something considerably less than a lawman. He guided companies, tracked stock, ran mail, and carried a reputation that arrived in a town before he did. If your name is Rockwell, your bloodline rode point on the most dangerous edge of the frontier, and the West it built was not built gently. Number 8 left England as a glassblower and blacksmith, and ended up hammering the ironwork of a civilization out of nothing in a desert with no forges. Number 8. Carter. From the Old English and Norman, cartere, the man who drives the cart, who hauls the load. William Carter was born in Ledbury, England, learned glassblowing and blacksmithing as a boy, heard Mormon missionaries singing outside his shop, and was baptized. He crossed with the 1847 company. And this is the part the legend skips. The Vanguard Company was not primarily made of prophets and generals. It was made of blacksmiths, carpenters, millwrights, wheelwrights, and boatmen. Men who could fix an axle in a river crossing. Men who could shoe an ox at dusk. Within a week of arriving in the valley, they had plowed and planted more than 50 acres and cut the first road into the timber. If your name is Carter, your bloodline hauled the loads, fixed the wheels, and swung the hammer that everything else was built on. Before we continue, if you are finding this useful, subscribe to Origins Decoded. Every week we uncover the history hidden inside surnames, bloodlines, and family names from across the world. Hit subscribe so you never miss one. The next surname was carried by a man who was given a farm boy's job at winter quarters and ended up an apostle whose great-grandson led the entire church. Number 7. Benson. From the Old English, the son of Ben, a name of plain, hard vowels. Ezra Taft Benson was born in Massachusetts in 1811, baptized in 1840, and by the winter of 1846 he was at winter quarters, the miserable riverbank encampment in Nebraska, where thousands of saints wintered in dugouts and sod huts after being driven out of Illinois. Hundreds died there of exposure and scurvy, and what they called black canker. From that ground, Benson was called to the Quorum of the 12 and went west with the First Company in 1847. Generations later, his great-grandson of the same name would become the 13th president of the church. If your name is Benson, your bloodline came out of a mass grave on the Missouri River and walked west anyway. Number 6 carries a name from the far north of Europe, and it belongs to the part of this story most Americans have never heard. The West was built in more languages than English. Number 6. Hansen. From the Scandinavian, son of Hans. Peter Hansen was born in Copenhagen, joined the church in 1844, and translated the Book of Mormon into Danish. Because here is what the wagon train myth hides. The great majority of the people who filled the Utah settlements were not American-born. They were British and Scandinavian converts, Danes, Swedes, Norwegians, Welsh miners, English mill workers, who left Liverpool on ships, crossed the Atlantic, took river steamers up the Mississippi, and walked the last 1,000 miles. Whole towns in Utah and Idaho were founded by people who arrived speaking no English at all. If your name is Hansen, your bloodline crossed an ocean, a continent, and a language to get to a valley they had only read about in a pamphlet. Number 5 is the name of the sea captain who sailed a shipload of saints around Cape Horn to California and then made the mistake of telling Brigham Young where they ought to settle. Number 5. Brannan. From the Irish Gaelic O'Brannan, descendant of the Little Raven. Samuel Brannan left New York Harbor on the 4th of February 1846, aboard the ship Brooklyn, with more than 200 saints, sailed around Cape Horn, stopped in Hawaii, and landed at Yerba Buena, which the world now calls San Francisco. He founded a settlement in Northern California. He rode east and met Brigham Young at the Green River crossing, and argued, hard, that the saints should come to California instead of stopping in a salt desert. Young said no, and Brannan went back to California and became, by many accounts, the first millionaire of the gold rush, and lost it all, and died broke. If your name is Brannan, your bloodline sailed 20,000 miles to build Zion by the Pacific, and was told to keep walking. Number 4 sounds like a job title, and it was. The man who carried it was the clerk who drove the wagon holding the written memory of an entire people. Number 4. Bullock. From the Old English bullock, the young bull, a name for a man who worked cattle. Thomas Bullock was the clerk of the Camp of Israel. He crossed to the valley in 1847, went back to winter quarters, and crossed again in 1848 in charge of what was called the church records wagon, the archive, the minutes, the histories, the paper. It broke down twice on the plains. His oxen died. He wrote a long, exhausted letter describing the whole ordeal. Think about what that means. In the middle of an exodus, with people starving and freezing, someone was assigned to make sure the documents got across. If your name is Bullock, your bloodline hauled the memory of a people across a continent in a wagon that kept breaking and refused to leave a single page behind. Number 3 carries one of the plainest names in English, and one of the heaviest. The man who bore it warned everyone what was about to happen, was overruled, and then walked into it anyway. Number 3. Savage. From the old French sauvage, the wild one, of the woods. Levi Savage was a sub-captain in a handcart company in 1856, and he stood up at a meeting in Florence, Nebraska, and told them plainly, "It is too late in the year. There are elderly people here. There are women and children. We will be wading through snow." He was outvoted. He was reprimanded for saying it. And then he said the words that ought to be carved somewhere. "Seeing you are going forward, I will go with you, I will suffer with you, and if necessary, I will die with you." And he went. If your name is Savage, your bloodline told the truth when the truth was unwelcome, lost the argument, and then walked into the storm beside the people who had refused to listen. Number 2 is the name of the man who organized the whole thing, and he is the reason there is a city there at all. Number 2, Young. From the Old English Geong, simply the young one of the oldest and most ordinary surnames in the language. Brigham Young was not a prophet in the way people usually imagine one. He was a carpenter and a glazier by trade, and what he actually was one of the great logistical organizers in American history. He divided the 1847 company into hundreds, 50s, and 10s on the old Israelite pattern. He set the hour they rose, the hour they moved, the order of the wagons. He sent hundreds of settlement parties out across the Great Basin over the next 30 years, into Utah, Idaho, Nevada, Arizona, California, choosing sites, assigning families by trade, telling a blacksmith and a miller and a farmer, "Go there, together, and build a town." Hundreds of towns across the West exist because of that system. He was also a man whose life and doctrines remain genuinely contested, and any honest telling holds both. If your name is Young, your bloodline organized the settlement of an entire region of the United States, and the map still shows the fingerprints. And now, number 1. This name is not carried by a leader or a general. It is carried by ordinary families from English mill towns and Danish farms who were too poor to buy oxen, and who were told they could walk instead, pulling everything they owned in a wooden cart built from unseasoned green lumber. Here is what happened to them. Number 1. Willie, and the names of the Martin Company beside it, from the Germanic root of William, will and helm, will and protection, the determined protector. In 1856, the church began the handcart plan, a way for the poorest converts in Europe to make the crossing at a third of the cost. Most handcart companies made it safely. 2 did not. The ship Thornton left England on the 4th of May, carrying the people who became the Willie Company under James G. Willie. The Horizon left 11 days later, carrying those who became the Martin Company under Edward Martin. Delays stacked on delays. They left Florence far too late in the season. The green wood shrank and split, and the wheels shrieked on their axles. At Fort Laramie, the promised provisions were not there. Rations fell to 12 ounces of flour a day. Luggage was cut to 10 pounds a person, and they threw away the blankets they would need within weeks. On the 19th of October, a blizzard hit central Wyoming. Brigham Young learned of it on the 4th of October and stood up in general conference and told the saints to go get them. Rescue wagons rolled out on the 7th. Over 300 rescuers went. They saved more than 1,000 people. They did not save everyone. Around 210 to 250 died of cold and starvation. Roughly 1 in 7 of the Willie Company and 1 in 4 of the Martin Company. On one night alone, climbing rocky ridge in a howling storm. 13 died. Survivors lost fingers, toes, and feet to frostbite. A survivor named John Chislett wrote that many a father pulled his cart with his children riding in it until the day before he died. If your name is Willie, or Chislett, or Linford, or Rowley, or any of the names on the markers standing in that empty Wyoming valley today, your bloodline walked into a blizzard, pulling everything it owned, buried its own children in frozen ground, and kept walking west. 12 surnames, 12 bloodlines. 12 corridors leading back through a burned-out city in Illinois, a winter camp of dugouts on the Missouri, 1,000 miles of prairie measured by a wooden gear on a wagon wheel, a valley of salt and sagebrush, and a storm in Wyoming that has never really ended for the families it took. Your name is not just a name, it is a company, it is a crossing, it is a decision made at a river in the wrong month by people who had nothing left to go back to. Drop your surname in the comments, and tell me which company your family came in with, and what year. And if your family kept the story, the real one, the one that does not fit on a monument, say it, because those stories deserve to be heard. If you made it to the end of this video, subscribe to Origins Decoded. Every week we go deeper into the history hidden inside the names people carry, without knowing what they mean. The next video is already waiting for you,